In today's podcast, you'll learn vocabulary that is used in formal legal documents. We'll help you understand what lawyers have written in contracts, wills, formal agreements, and other legal documents. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with nearly 60 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it up to the next level. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Really looking forward to the last podcast of 2024. So a big welcome to new listeners. Lovely to have you. And also, if you've been listening for a while, thank you for following us this year. Next year, Reza, will be our 11th year of podcasting. Do you think we'll make it through another year?
Oh, yes. I think we've got at least another 5 years on this.
You reckon?
Maybe more. Oh, yeah.
Good to hear it. First this week, we have a voice message from Adrian from Barcelona.
Hi Reza, hi Craig. I hope you're doing great. This is Adrian from Barcelona. It was high time that I sent you a new message since the last time I did it was a few months ago, I think. And I didn't do it before because I've had some little changes in my job that affected my schedule. And now I have a more hectic schedule than usual, but anyways, I always manage to listen to your podcast before hitting the sack or even when commuting to the office. And well, that's not really a problem. So the topic that I would like you to talk about today is related to the field of law. And especially it is related to the words that are used in the formal documents that lawyers write. And these particular words are, for example, hereof, thereof, whereof, and hereafter, and so on. And why am I particularly interested in these kind of words? Well, I am used to writing formal documents at work, such as reports or proposals. So I would like to enhance my vocabulary and my writing in these occasions. And on the other hand, I'm preparing the C2 exam, so I think that it would be helpful. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much, Adrian, for your lovely message. I really enjoyed some of the expressions you used, like it's high time I sent you a message. That was lovely. Before hitting the sack, before going to bed. That was also very nicely informal. And to enhance my vocabulary, I also enjoyed you using that expression. Any comments, Reza?
Yes, I also noticed a nice typical collocation, a hectic schedule.
Yeah.
You pronounced it the American way. You could say schedule or schedule. They're both right. You have a hectic schedule. Well, I'm glad to hear that you get a chance to use your English. I can see that you've got a high level. You definitely come across as a C2 student.
What does come across mean?
To come across means you give that impression. So I think you've got a very good chance of passing the exam when it comes, and good luck with it.
Yeah, best of luck with your studies for C2, Adrian. Now, we're going to look at written legal English. Legalese is another way to describe written legal English. And we have spoken about basic legal English before, haven't we, Reza?
We have quite a while ago in episode 231. We called that episode Basic Legal English. We got a link in the show notes. It's very easy to find our episodes, as you probably know by now. You just write inglespodcast.com/231, and on the webpage, that will take you to the appropriate episode.
And if you want to follow along with us and read the words that we're going to look at with examples and a definition, go to the show notes for today's podcast, and you'll find that at inglespodcast.com/550. Why do lawyers do this, Reza? Do they do it on purpose? Why don't lawyers use language that everyone can understand? And I'm not only speaking about lawyers who are native English speakers, because it's also true in other languages, isn't it? In Spanish, there's like a different set of words for legal English.
I suspect that it's just partly because,
To charge more money?
yes, there's certainly that, but also the language that they use is the same language that they've been using for a very, very, very long time. It hasn't developed much. They don't admit many new words or current trendy words or ideas in legalese. So I think that's why it sounds, certainly as far as English is concerned, but I'm sure it's similar in other languages, it sounds very 19th century, maybe even 18th century.
So it keeps the language constant so that you can understand a document that was written 100 years ago and it doesn't change. The meanings of the words don't change. That makes sense, actually, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's partly that, yeah. It's language whose meaning is established so everybody knows what it... Well, not everybody. No, sorry. All legal professionals know what it means, although the rest of us, you could say mere mortals, that's a sarcastic way of saying those of us who are not experts, we may not know what it means, but all the lawyers who have to deal with each other know what it means because it's language which has been around for a long time. So they know what they're talking about, even if we don't know what we're talking about.
Exactly. So let's help you understand for all lawyers out there, including Adrian, and also just normal people like me and you, who need to understand contracts that we're reading. Now, the aforementioned Adrian did mention or speak about some of these words that we're going to look at. And when I say aforementioned, I mean the person who was mentioned before. So that's our first word, aforementioned. Here's another example for you. The aforementioned parties agree to undertake full responsibility for all liabilities listed below. So that word aforementioned in that sentence means that the parties or people were mentioned before. Now, when I say parties, I don't mean music and drink and alcohol and food. I mean a group of people. So a party is a group of people, like a political party, for example. The aforementioned parties agree to undertake or take full responsibility for all liabilities listed below.
The Spanish word for aforementioned is one of my favorite funny words in Spanish. It's susodicho.
Susodicho?
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
Susodicho. So I get the dicho bit, dicho, said
To
before.
say, yeah.
Suso, I guess it means the one above there, something like that. And I have a particular affection for that word because I used to call Coco, my dog who is no longer with us, rest in peace. I used to call him El Susodicho, the aforementioned. And the reason I did that was because if I was talking about him, but not to him, I didn't want to use his name because anytime I was talking about him and I said, blah, 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 Coco, oh, his ears would prick up. He
would
knew
bark.
I was talking about him. He would bark and he was like, oh, what's going on? So I found out that a way of talking about him to Spanish speakers without him knowing that I was talking about him was to use the aforementioned. So we've mentioned him before, Coco. So the aforementioned might need to go out for a walk. So I would say El Susodicho. So it became a nickname for Coco. El Susodicho, the aforementioned.
I like it. That's lovely. Okay, the next word, Reza, herein. So here, you know that word, H-E-R-E, and in, the preposition, when it's joined together, herein. What does that mean?
Well, think about the two words, here and in. So it means in this document or in the statement. So here in this place, in this document that you're reading, it's in here. For example, the conditions stated herein must be adhered to by all parties. In other words, the conditions that are written here in this document.
And to add another preposition to herein and make it a longer word, you can say hereinafter. Now, these these legal words, they are quite logical. If you look at them and you think about it, you can just break them down and separate it, because very often you've got a word and then a preposition, or in this case, two prepositions. So just separate them. Here, in, after, which means the following part of this document. Here's an example. The company, hereinafter referred to as the contractor, agrees to the terms. So in the following part of the document, hereinafter, and it goes together as one word, hereinafter.
Yet another expression, and there's a lot more coming with here, is hereby. Think about the two parts. Here we know, and by, by, and it means by this means, or as a result of this. For example, the undersigned, that means the people who have signed at the bottom of this document, the undersigned hereby agrees to the terms and conditions. So hereby, by signing this thing here, you agree. You hereby agree.
I hereby declare or say that my New Year's resolution is to eat less chocolate and lose weight.
You've said that before.
I know. I hereby declare. I'm saying I hereby declare that is my New Year's resolution. Let's see how it goes in 2025. The next one also has here, and it's herewith. Here, and then the preposition with, W-I-T-H, herewith, which means with this letter or with this document. For example, you might see the sentence, please find the signed agreement attached herewith. Now, when you send an email or a document, you might say, please find attached the document, blah, blah, blah. But in a legal contract or document, you might see the signed agreement is attached herewith, which means with this document.
The next word, well, actually words, because we got two synonyms with here, are heretofore. So think of the three parts, here plus two plus four. That's F-O-R-E, not the number four. Or you could also say hitherto. It means the same as heretofore. And either of those words means before now or up until this point. Here's an example. The company has heretofore complied with all regulations. Or I could say the company has hitherto complied with all regulations. So that means the company up to this point has complied with, followed all the regulations. Up to this point, heretofore or hitherto.
Okay, I think we need just a 2-minute break from all of this legalese and legal vocabulary, legal English. As this is the last podcast of 2024, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who has taken part in my conversation courses online this year. I won't mention all of you by name, it would just take too long. You know who you are. I just want to say a huge thank you for taking part in the courses. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did. It was really, really lovely to get to know people and practice English with such a diverse mix of nationalities, cultures, and personalities, all of us speaking and communicating and exchanging ideas together in these conversation groups. I am going to continue with courses next year from the middle of January, more or less. So if you have done a course with me in the past, or if you're curious and you'd like to try a conversation course with me, send me an email and I'll give you all of the information. The courses are divided into two groups, two levels. There's the upper intermediate, more or less a B2 level group, and there's a higher C1, C2 level for more advanced speakers of English. I need to speak to you first if you've never done a course with me before, because I need to know your level to let you know which days and which times the courses are meeting. So if you're curious and you'd like to speak with me for a few minutes on Zoom, just for me to get an idea of your level and give you more information about the course, send me an email. My email address is Craig, C-R-A-I-G, info@inglespodcast.com. And if you have already done a course with me and you'd like to continue next year, then please send me an email and let me know. Thanks for listening. Now, let's get back to the legal English. Another legal word with here is hereafter. So the word here and then after. Hereafter, which means from now on or in the future. Here's an example. The obligations hereafter shall be governed by this contract, which means anything you are obliged to do will be controlled or said in this contract, and those obligations are in the future. The obligations hereafter. If you change the order after here, it becomes clear.
The next and final one we have for you with here is hereof. It's logical. Of goes with here, so it means of this document or of this matter, of this thing here. For example, this clause is part hereof and binding on all parties. So that means this clause is part of this document, and binding means that it must be legally followed by law. It's binding.
Binding is an interesting word because you find it in other collocations like a binding contract, for example, which is a contract that cannot be avoided or stopped. Or legally binding. Legally, you have to do it. It's a binding agreement. Our next word is therein. So there, T-H-E-R-E, there, not here, but there. And the preposition in, therein, which simply means in that place or in that document or in that respect. For example, the contract includes a confidentiality clause, and any breach of the terms therein may result in legal action. Let's look at the word breach in that sentence. A breach is kind of a break. If you have a breach of contract, then the contract has been broken. So it's not binding anymore. And if there's a breach of trust, you stop trusting someone. You can also have a security breach where there's an invasion into the security of a program, for example. So again, the contract includes a confidentiality clause, and any breach of the terms therein or in that document may result in legal action.
To think of the meaning of therein, just think of the meaning of herein. So here is near and there is far away, right? So we said earlier that herein means in this document or in this statement or in this contract, etc. So therein means in that document or that contract, or it could even be a place. So not this one, but that one. It's as simple as that. And the next word we got for you is thereof. And that means of the thing just mentioned. For example, the owner of the property and the liabilities thereof. In other words, the liabilities of the thing we just mentioned. In other words, the liabilities of the owner of the property.
Let's look for a second at that word liability, because that is very common in contractual and legal English. If you are liable for something, you are legally responsible for it. So if you deny liability, you refuse responsibility. You don't accept that you're responsible. And if you assume liability, you accept responsibility for the thing. The next word is thereunto. So there again, the same word, T-H-E-R-E, and with the preposition unto, which means to that place or to that position, thereunto. Here's an example. He was appointed to the position and took an oath thereunto. An oath is a very, very strong promise. So to take an oath is to promise something in a very strong and morally binding or legally binding way. He was appointed to the position and took an oath thereunto, or took an oath to that.
Thereunto is a great one. I think that's my favorite for being the most antiquated.
Convoluted.
Convoluted, yeah.
Confusing.
If you hear the word thereunto spoken, it can only mean one of two things. You're in a court, or you've traveled back in a time machine to the 18th century. It's got to be one of those two things.
You're talking to Charles Dickens in your sleep. Thereunto.
The next word is thereafter. You could probably figure out that means after that. For example, the tenant moved out, and the landlord thereafter made repairs. In other words, the landlord made repairs after that, after the tenant had moved out. That one's fairly easy to work out.
And I think you may be getting the hang of these words, which means you're kind of understanding what happens with them now. So the next one might be quite easy for you. Therewith. Therewith. There, T-H-E-R-E, and with, W-I-T-H. So if thereafter is after that, what is therewith? Well, it's with that. So in this sentence, the documents and the evidence presented therewith are sufficient. In other words, the document and the evidence presented with that are sufficient. Reza, what do you call a priest who becomes a lawyer?
Priest who becomes a lawyer? I don't know. What do you call such a person?
A father-in-law.
Oh, brilliant. I love it. That's good. That's a good play on words.
Sometimes we call priests, holy men, fathers. Yes, father. No, father. So that's the play on words. What's the next word?
Well, we've had a group of words with here. We've had a group of words with there. And still thinking about places, our next group is with where. W-H-E-R-E. The next word or words, because we've got two synonyms equally formal, we've got whereupon or whereafter. Now, upon is a preposition that you sometimes hear on its own. It means on, but it's a bit old-fashioned. You could say, the dog jumped up and sat upon my knee. It's a kind of old-fashioned way of saying on. So whereupon or whereafter, either of those means immediately after which, or as a result of which, or immediately after something happens. In modern non-legal English, we might just use the word on. For example, on leaving the house, I met my friend in the street. On leaving the house, I could say, I left the house, whereupon I met my friend in the street. But you'd sound very odd if you said that in a normal conversation.
Very 18th century.
Here's some examples of these words used, these legal words. He signed the contract, whereupon the deal was finalized. Or the manager approved the proposal, whereupon or whereafter the team began implementing the project. In other words, the team started working immediately after, whereafter, the manager's approval.
Our next word is similar, so we've had whereupon and whereafter. The next one is wherein, which means in which. For example, the agreement outlines the terms wherein the parties must comply. In other words, the agreement outlines the terms in which the parties must comply.
And similarly, you won't be surprised to hear that whereby means by which. For example, the contract includes a clause whereby disputes will be resolved through arbitration. Whereby, that means by this means or by this process. Whereby disputes will be resolved through arbitration. Arbitration is like formal legal negotiation.
Remember, you can see these words, the example sentences, and the descriptions in the show notes to this podcast. Go to inglespodcast.com/550. The next word is wherefore. So we've had herefore. Here's wherefore, which means for which reason. Here's an example. Wherefore, the plaintiff seeks damages in the amount of 10,000 euros. Wherefore, the plaintiff seeks damages in the amount of 10,000 euros. The plaintiff is the person asking for money or asking for compensation. And to seek means to look for or to request. So wherefore, for which reason, the plaintiff seeks damages in the amount of 10,000 euros.
And the last expression we've got for you comes in two parts, and it's quite a common expression. It is sometimes used outside legal documents as well, but it's definitely formal, and that is the former and the latter. Be careful, the latter is spelled L-A-T-T-E-R. Not later, that would be L-A-T-E-R. This is double T, the latter. The former, the latter. And it means the first one, just mentioned, and the second one, just mentioned. So, for example,
I can think of one.
Go ahead, a short one.
I drink both coffee and tea. The former I drink for breakfast. The latter I drink after lunch. So that's maybe a silly example because it sounds very formal to use those words in that context. But when I say the former, I mean the first thing I said, which is the coffee. And when I say the latter, that's the second thing I said, which is the tea. So those words replace the thing I was talking about.
Funnily enough, my habits are completely the opposite of yours. I drink tea first and for breakfast and coffee later in the day.
So you would drink the latter first and then the former first, second.
Exactly. Yeah. Here's a legalese statement, which I'm saying, of course, rather tongue-in-cheek, which means not quite seriously.
I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek now.
My tongue's in my cheek, so I'm trying not to laugh. Let me first begin by saying the word measures, you really don't hear much these days. MESSRS, that's right. It doesn't look like English. It looks like Czech, but it is English. MESSRS is the plural of Mr. If it's two Misters, they're measures. Here we go. Messrs. Wieland and Shah are to be held wholly liable for the content of the Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig podcast. The former, Mr. Wieland, being responsible for the production, scripting and recording of said podcast. The latter, Mr. Shah, being responsible merely for the scripting thereof. Both parties claim full responsibility for any and all language acquisition directly acquired, as well as any resultant boredom suffered as a consequence of prolonged exposure to the aforementioned podcast.
That's very clever. Did that take you a long time to write? I think that's very, very clever.
In about a minute or so. Yeah. Maybe I should change careers. I could have a career as a lawyer.
Yeah, why not? You'd earn more money.
There's a lot more money as a lawyer than podcasting or teaching, believe me.
Just to clarify, the aforementioned Wieland, that's me, that's my surname, Craig Wieland, and the aforementioned Shah is Reza Shah. Very nice. If you want to see that paragraph written, go to the show notes, inglespodcast.com/550. And now it's your turn to practice your English. What would you like to hear in a future episode? Reza, how can people send us voice messages?
You could leave a message with SpeakPipe. We got a link in the show notes. It's speakpipe.com/English-podcast. Bear in mind, though, that there's a maximum of 90 seconds of audio recording there. Craig, what if people want to write to us?
We welcome your emails. You can send yours to me. I'm Craig, CRAIG, at inglespodcast.com. And to get in touch with Reza, write to Belfast Reza. That's the name of the city, and REZA at gmail.com. We prefer the aforementioned method of voicemail, but we welcome any of your communication methods.
And if you're a Spanish speaker and you want to improve your English even more, with free and paid resources, you could visit the Mansión Inglés website at mansioningles.com. And specifically for paid products, you can browse the online store. And you'll find that at store, that's STORE, store.mansioningles.net.
And before we go out the door and say goodbye this week, we would like to say thank you very, very much to our Patreon supporters. People who join our Patreon program get instant access to the transcriptions of this podcast so that you can read every word that we say. And I'll also be inviting our Patreon supporters to a Zoom chat in January and in months going forward through the year as well, so that you can practice your speaking. For more information, go to patreon.com, patreon.com/English podcast.
We would love to list every single Patreon supporter's name at the end of each episode, but we don't have time. So what we do is simply name our most recent supporters who joined us this month, and they are David Santana Rubiales, Ezequiel, Fatima, Angeles, and Genesis Cañizares. Thank you to you, new supporters, and also thanks to all our existing supporters.
What's next week, Reza?
Next week, we'll be talking about festivals around the world.
Well, that's a lovely subject to talk about, so I'm looking forward to discussing that with you and our listeners next week. Until next time, thank you for listening this week. Have a wonderful week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends so that more people can listen. And we remind you that the music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.